or Asiya, both are correct actually. Good. Who else? Maryam alayhi salam. Good. Alright. If you have one, but the problem is my phone doesn't take plugs.
Oh, it doesn't?
It doesn't work anymore.
It's too tech for me.
I know, subhanAllah.
The high tech.
So,
I'm still...
yeah, no, mine is the one that's regressed. I need to get it fixed. So, khair inshallah, we've been discussing the women of Jannah, and like Sheikh Yahya said, that we spoke about Asiya bint Muzahim, and who is she? Hands. Yeah? The wife of Fir'aun, right? Radiallahu anha. Number two, who was number two?
The hairdresser.
Well, yes, actually, good point. Yeah, in this episode about Asiya, we spoke about the hairdresser, that she's also a woman of Jannah, and the Rasul ﷺ could actually smell the beautiful smell that came from her when he was going to the Isra and Mi'raj. So the hairdresser is also a woman of Jannah. All right, who else? Maryam. And who is she? Sayyidina Isa's mother, right? And number three, we spoke about last week, our mom. Who's our mom? Yeah. Khadija radiallahu anha. Why did I say she's our mom? Why did I say Khadija is our mom? Our mother. I mean, if every woman is our mom, every amazing woman is our mom, Amelia Earhart, is she my mom? No, right? Why Khadija specifically? Who remembers? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, وَأَزْوَاجُهُ أُمَّهَاتُهُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that any woman that is married to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the mother of the Muslims. So that means Khadija is just like our mom. What does it mean to be just like our mom? That number one, we respect her. Number one, could you ever yell at your mom? No, right? Could you ever disobey your mom? Why is everyone not looking me in the eye suddenly? You don't disobey your mom, right? Another thing, an interesting thing, a fiqhi thing, which is that you cannot marry your mom. And it's just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that it is not allowed for anybody to marry the wives of the Prophet after he passes away. Right? So after the Rasul passed away, none of the wives... Guys, is there a whole Pokemon club going on over there? Hello? Hi! Pokemon guys. This is a masjid. We're in a class. Why are you guys playing Pokemon? Allahu Akbar. Those are not even good cards. Anyways, that when the Rasul passed away, he left a lot of widows. None of the Muslims were allowed to marry them after the Rasul passed away, and it's explicit in the Quran. And this is because the wives of the Prophet are our moms, and we can't marry our moms. That's weird, right? So Khadija radiallahu anha is in that category. Now last week we spoke a lot about Khadija radiallahu anha, and we said that she is one of the 4 women that have perfected their religion. Now I have to say this because I noticed some people made this mistake. When the Rasul said 4 women perfected their religion, some people misunderstand that and say there are 4 women in Jannah. Only 4. This is not true. This is a misunderstanding. When he says 4 women have perfected their religion, meaning there are 4 women that have gotten 100%. Not 99, not 98, not A-, 100%. But there are many women throughout history that the Rasul has said have been in Jannah. And one of them, Sheikh Umar said, is the hairdresser, right? She's not one of the 4 that have perfected her religion, but the Rasul knows that she's in Jannah. Many companions, women companions, right? The Rasul said that they are in Jannah, that he heard them in Jannah, right? So I heard a few people get this mistake and they're like, oh, you know, many men went to Jannah, only 4 women went to Jannah. A'udhu billah, that's not true at all. We're just saying that there are 4 women that have perfected their religion. And number 3 on this list is Khadija bint Khuwaylid radiallahu anha. Before we start with the new person today, can 1 or 2 people maybe mention some things that we learned about Khadija last week? New things, I don't want to hear something that she was the wife of the Prophet. La wallah, give me something new. Okay, so we're going to have to repeat the Khadija class today. Besides Yahya, anyone? Y'all don't know nothing about Khadija? Alright, I guess we're repeating the Khadija class again. Yalla, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So Khadija, okay, Bismillah.
So basically, she was trying to find workers that are like really honest.
Okay, why? What was she?
Because they tried like to take her money away.
So she was what? An entrepreneur, a businesswoman, right? She had a business, right? We say businessman, but she was a businesswoman, right? And she was trying to find honest workers because they were all what? Yeah, like they were kind of being loosey-goosey with her money. They'd go out, make some money, and then, come back, and if they made 100, they gave her 90. And she's like, oh, you only made 90? Like, yeah, business is tough, we only made 90. And she was smart, she knew what was going on, she wasn't getting played. But she's like, I'm looking for an honest person, right? So, the Rasul ﷺ, she sent him where? His first trip, yeah? With her? Right, who is that someone who remembers? She wanted to send him with one of the caravans, and remember Khadija had huge caravans, 800, right? Someone said Zayd? Not Zayd, no. Maysara, thank you, mashallah. So she sent him with Maysara. Maysara was already one of her employees. And she sent the Rasul ﷺ, this is his first time, so she wants someone to keep an eye on him. So she sent Maysara with the Rasul ﷺ, and they went to, where did they go? Who remembers which country they went to? Palestine, technically, I guess you could say. I mean, modern day, it's not Palestine. Not Jerusalem, no.
Jordan.
It's all of it is Bilad al-Sham, Jordan, mashallah. So it's modern day Jordan, right? Nowadays where it is, it's the country of Jordan. But back then, the entire area was called Asham. Asham included Palestine, it included Jordan, it included Syria, it included Lebanon. This is before the British and the French drew all these lines and made up these countries and stuff. It was all one land, yani. Egypt was always different. They were always separate. But Sham was always that big spot. And we said that the Rasul ﷺ sat under this tree, and this tree is still there till this day. And the monk that saw him said, we have been told that nobody sits under this tree except what? A prophet. Maysara also noticed some other things about Muhammad ﷺ, which was noteworthy to him. Like what? Yeah. Yeah, that there was always a shade following him with a cloud, and when he would sit under the trees the branches would go over his head to shade him, subhanAllah. Which is not a normal thing. What else? There was a mark on his back, but the Arabs didn't know what that meant. So the Christians and the Jews knew exactly what that meant. The Arabs had no idea what that was. So he's asking about the seal of the prophethood that was on the back of the Rasul ﷺ. The Arabs didn't know what that was, but the Jews and the Christians, they knew what it was. But what else did Maysara notice about the Prophet ﷺ? He was very honest, right? He didn't do what most salesmen do. They gas up their merchandise and then they, highball you like crazy, and then they lie about it, and then they throw in some extra fees and like only $50. And it's like, okay, that'll be 100. What? Tax and tip and finder's fee and blah 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 and processing fee and Visa card fee and whatever. No, he was very, very honest and very straightforward, and many other things like this that Maysara noticed. And he gave a very, very good review of the Prophet ﷺ, and Khadija was interested in him, and she married him actually, right? And they had a very prosperous life. He gifted her a necklace and many other things as well. She gifted him Zayd ibn Haritha, which was her gift to him, and the Rasul ﷺ ended up adopting. They lived a very happy life and happy marriage. Again, we said that there was not a single argument that they ever had except that one time where the Rasul ﷺ was upset about what? Who remembers? Some of the girls have to know. Bismillah. We'll take us in a second. Yeah. Good. There was a party going on where people used to worship idols. And maybe Allahu Alam that his family was thinking, like, everyone else is going. And the Rasul got so upset. He said, Wallahi, I'm not going to leave the house. Wallahi, I won't see Lat al-Uzza. And Khadija is like, she said, no, calm down, it's okay. We don't have to do Lat al-Uzza. We'll stay here, we'll ignore the party, right? He was very upset. That was the only time. And we said that this is unique with Khadija because the Rasul ﷺ, he's a human being and his wives were human beings. They got into arguments. But Khadija was special. They never got into any arguments, right? When we get to Hafsa, right, they argued a lot. When he got to Aisha, they argued a lot. Not that they didn't love each other, it's a normal marriage, right? And all married couples will argue, right? I'm in that boat too now. But they're human beings. Who remembers the final thing, which is how Khadija radiallahu anha passed away? Yeah, I can come up and give the class, inshallah. I'm just kidding. Come on, guys. Alright, Barak, go. Yalla. Huh? Oh, you made a face. So. I sent you the link. You didn't watch it? Why'd you ask for it? I don't know. Who knows? How did Khadija radiallahu anha pass away? Yes. SubhanAllah. Yes.
She starved to death.
She basically starved to death, which is when the Quraysh put the Muslims in a concentration camp, right, during the boycott. They basically had no food, and they stayed in this state for 3 years, and they were scavenging whatever food they could. Khadija's nephew used to smuggle some food into the camp for everyone, and she wouldn't eat. She would give all of her food to her family and her kids and stuff, and they would eat, and she would actually, not eat. And she basically lost all her weight. She became emaciated, and she was already an old woman. By the time the boycott ended, like 2 or 3 weeks after the boycott ended, khalas, there was nothing left in her and she passed away. But not before Jibreel alayhi salam came and delivered the salam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to her. That Allah is giving salam to you, and He gives you good news about a palace of pearls in Jannah. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you good news that you have a palace in Jannah. There's no noise, there's no sadness, there's no turmoil in it. Meaning that, Allah is appreciative of everything Khadija did in her service to the Prophet ﷺ. And then we talked a lot about how much the Rasul loved her so much that even when he went to Mecca, he set up his tent next to her grave, how he cried just when he saw her necklace, how, Aisha, she kind of took one step above and she said, Allah replaced her with someone better. And the Rasul was like, no, he did not. Like, he was not ashamed to say this. Right? He said, no, Allah did not replace her with someone better. Right? And Aisha, she said after that, I never spoke about Khadija again. Right? So, this brings us to today's class. Today's class is very interesting because we're going to be talking a lot about one of the people that proposed to Khadija before she married the Prophet. If you guys remember last week, we said that after Khadija's second husband passed away, she stayed single for some time. And many men proposed to her. And they were very rich men and very honest men and very wealthy men and prestigious men. And they came from good families and stuff. And she was the princess of Quraysh. Everyone wanted to marry her. And she kept saying no, 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 no. Why was she saying no to these suitors? Yeah. Maybe, but probably that's not the exact reason. Girls, I refuse to get an answer from anyone besides you right now. Because y'all are going to get married in a few years. You have to know this answer. Why was she saying no to these guys? Was it because they didn't have a gym membership? What was it? Yeah. Can't hear, Habibti. No, you're gonna have to come close. All the way over there, there's no way I can hear. Why was she saying no to them? Because they were ugly? What? I didn't hear. Bara. Fadal.
So, how do people try to house her beach if she's already married?
After her husband passed away.
She died before.
La Habib, I'm saying that this is before she died, obviously. No one's proposing to her when she's dead. When her husband died.
Why would you propose this?
She stayed single for some time. After her second husband passed away, she was single for some time. And people proposed. Yes, thank you. She had what? She had a bad feeling. She had a bad feeling about them, that they weren't the right person for her. And it wasn't because they were ugly or they didn't have muscles or they didn't have money. She looked at them and she said, okay, is this a good person? And she looked at them and she says, probably not. I have a bad feeling about them. And she said no. And when she saw the Rasul she said, yes, Ya banat, the most important thing that you will ever learn from Khadija is picking a proper husband. This is the most important thing. I don't care if his hair is gelled all the way back and he has a nice job and mashallah his biceps like this. If he's a trash, if his akhlaq are trash, do not marry him. Okay? This is the most important lesson that you can take away from this. And Khadija taught this to us. That she saw these suitors and she's like, okay, I mean, they're rich and they're good and they have nice families and good jobs and their families are nice, but I don't think they're good people. Right? And in our times, like, oh, he works for Google. He must be amazing. He drives a Tesla. Like, who cares? Is he a good person? He's kind of, yeah, when he gets angry, he starts punching holes in the wall. But I think he'll be a good husband. No, right? So she got a bad feeling. One of the people that went and proposed to her, his name was Amr ibn Hisham. Amr ibn Hisham was one of the most powerful men in Quraysh. He was from the Banu Makhzum tribe, which was a huge tribe in Mecca, right? He was very rich. He had a lot of sons, big, powerful family, and he himself was a big man. He was like 6 foot something, huge biceps. Like he was a big guy, right? And he proposed. She said no. She had a bad feeling. He said, all right, whatever. He went and married someone else. Why am I telling you? He's going to come important later on. The person we're going to talk about today is not one of the 4 people that were perfected their religion, but she is a woman of Jannah. So we're going to need to learn about her. And she's very different than Khadija in the sense that Khadija was a woman in Mecca that already had everything. She was a businesswoman, she was from a nice family, she had a great husband, a loving family. She was called the princess of Quraysh. They called her Tahira, the pure one. Her reputation was great, she was rich. She already had a lot going for her, mashallah. The woman we're talking about today was the exact opposite. She had nothing going for her. And this woman, her name was Sumayya. What was her name? Sumayya. Does anybody know a Sumayya? Like a girl named Sumayya from your class or, yeah? Sumayya, it's a very beautiful name, right? Sumayya was actually not an Arab woman. She was from Abyssinia. Abyssinia is the area that we call nowadays, the eastern part of Africa, which includes parts of Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan. That whole area we called Ethiopia. She was an African woman. And the Arabs used to buy and sell Africans as slaves. Sumayya, when she was very young, she was bought from the Arab markets as a slave girl. Now, are slaves powerful people? Are they rich people? No. Are slaves usually treated very well? No, absolutely not. Sumayya, of course, was a typical slave girl. That she was bought from Abyssinia. They brought her to Mecca as a slave, and she worked in Mecca as a slave. And in Mecca, and to be very brutally honest, the Arabs were very racist people. They used to call Abyssinians raisin head. They used to call them crows, right? They had very racist remarks against Abyssinian people just because of the color of their skin, right? So even back then, there was racism. And of course, this is something that Islam came and completely destroyed. The Rasul said, no black person is better than a white person, and no white person is better than a black person, except by what? Iman, piety, right? Their taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what makes it, has nothing to do with your skin color. But of course, this is before Islam. The Arabs didn't know or didn't care about this. Sumayya, when she came to Mecca, she actually fell in love with another slave man. He was not Abyssinian like her, he was a Yemeni slave. And his name was Yasir. Yasir and Sumayya were both slaves, so they both got married to each other. And when they got married, their master, who was a very powerful person in Mecca, he liked them as his slaves, and he thought that they were very good workers and very hard workers, so he treated them very well, and he actually freed them. He says, you don't have to be slaves anymore. But in Mecca, even if you were freed as a slave, you still were not on the same level as a person who was born free. So a person that was a slave and then freed, they called them a mawla. A mawla is someone who used to be a slave and is not a slave anymore. An example of a mawla in the time of the Prophet ﷺ is Zayd. Zayd was a slave, and then the Rasul freed him and made him his son, so he's a mawla. Now, Sumayya and Yasir, even though they're free now, they are under the protection of their master. How it worked back then, they didn't have passports back then. Right? Nowadays, you have a passport that says, I'm American, I'm Egyptian, I'm, Chinese, whatever. Your passport says wherever you're from, and that country is supposed to take care of you and protect you. So if I visit another country, for example, right, and they treat me bad, I say, listen, I'm an American, leave me alone. This is actually, I had a friend who, he's a convert Muslim. He's not an Arab or anything, he's an American. And he became a Muslim and he wanted to visit Egypt. So when he went to Egypt, he asked, other Egyptians, he says, what should I do when I'm in Egypt? They said, take your American passport, walk around and say, Jawaz, Jawaz, Jawaz. That's all you do. And he said, I don't know any Arabic. I just went around the streets of Egypt like, Amriki, Jawaz Amriki. He said, they would move him to the front of the line. They give him the food for free, discount, whatever. They wouldn't mess with him. If they tried to rip off someone else, they see him, Jawaz Amriki. He was like, oh, sorry. In the airport, same thing. Why? Because who protects him? America. Now, if an Arab comes to America and says, Jawaz from your country, it's not going to do you any good, right? This is how it was back then too. That if you were from the Quraysh gives you protection. If you were from Abyssinia, who's going to help you? You're a slave. You're a mawla. Like, what are you? If you're a Yemeni, for example, the Yemenis weren't seen as anything. The Yemenis, they used to buy them as slaves too. They're like, well, what are you? If you're a Roman, for example, whoa, we don't want to mess with Rome, right? So there was a hierarchy back then too. So Sumayya and Yasir, when they got married, they were mawlas. Now they're free. But they need the protection of the Quraysh because their countries are not going to protect them. Their countries don't care about them, right? So they have no choice but to live under the protection of their master. Then their master passes away. When their master dies, who are they under the protection of? Huh? Someone said it. When the master of the Mawla dies, who's their new protector? Huh? I can't hear. The son? So sometimes if they were slaves, it would pass to the son. But if you were a Mawla, what would happen is if your master died, that's it. You have no more protector. You either find a new protector or you're basically living without protection. And Sumayya and Yasir, they basically said, you know what, no one's messing with us, no one has any beef with us, we will just live without any protector for now. And they grew up and they had a son named Ammar. So Sumayya, Yasir, and what was their son's name? Ammar. And they grew up and they lived a happy life and everything was normal, and Sumayya was an old lady at this point. Then one day everything changed. Everyone started hearing rumors that there's a new religion in Mecca. So Sumayya, she's hearing that there's a new religion and she says, I don't know what this is. And it sounds dangerous. It sounds like it's going to cause us problems, so I'm not going to ask any questions. I don't want to find out about it. Her son, however, Ammar, he was like, you know what, I want to hear what's going on. So he asked some people around, can you stop that please? So he asked some people around, he says, where can I find out more about Muhammad's religion? So they said there's the house of Arqam, Dar al-Arqam. This is where the Muslims are meeting every night and they're talking about Islam. If you want to find out, go there and find out. So Ammar, he went to Dar al-Arqam and he found other slaves there, which he thought was very weird. Why was that weird? Maybe. Let me elaborate. He goes inside Dar al-Arqam and he finds Abu Bakr sitting next to Bilal. And he finds Khabbab sitting next to Abdurrahman ibn Auf. And he finds Muhammad ﷺ sitting with another slave. And they're sitting and they're talking and they're chatting and they're eating. Would a master ever want to have, food with his slave and sit down with his slave and, should sit and talk and treat him like a normal person? No, this was very not normal. But the Rasul ﷺ, he treated everyone the same. He treated them with love and respect and dignity and kindness, even if they were a slave. Bilal, for example, the Rasul ﷺ was like, you are going to be our mu'adhin. And he made him climb up on the Kaaba and give adhan. When the disbelievers saw him on the Kaaba, they said, why is this black man standing on the Kaaba? How dare he? Like a black man standing on the Kaaba giving adhan, like how dare it? Like it was not something that they understood. So Ammar, he goes in, he listens to the message of Islam and he instantly falls in love with Islam. He says, this is amazing. This is the most amazing thing. Because by the way, the masters would make their slaves worship the same idols that they worshipped. They were forced to. They had no choice. If a slave came and says, "Oh, I'm a Christian," the master was like, "Christian A, like you're following my religion," right? So he goes back to his mom Sumayya and his dad Yasir, and he tells them about Islam, and he says we should become Muslim. So Sumayya, when she hears more, she says, "I want to visit the Prophet." So she goes to the Rasul ﷺ and she says something very interesting. She says, "Amantu bima atayt." I believe in what you brought. وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّكَ نَبِيُّ اللَّهِ. And I bear witness that you are the Prophet of Allah. So she just immediately, she sees him and she says, I believe in what you're saying. I give the shahada. Even though the shahada wasn't something that was known, she said the shahada from her own mind. She knew like what to say. So she became one of the first Muslims. Islam was a secret for 3 years, and then one day the Rasul ﷺ made it public. And there's a hadith where Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said there were 6 people who everybody knew was a Muslim when Islam became public. These were the first 6 people that everybody knew was a Muslim. Number 1 is who? The Prophet, of course. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, number 1. Everyone knew he was a Muslim. Number 2, always after Muhammad is who? Abu Bakr. Bilal, Khabbab, Ammar, and Sumayya. These were the first 6 people who everybody knew were Muslim. So Sumayya was on that list, and her son Ammar was on that list. Her husband Yasir tried to keep it a secret, but eventually they found out. Now, when Sumayya was discovered and everyone found out that she was a Muslim, right? She's an old lady, and she has no protector. So unlike Khadija, we mentioned that Khadija, she was left alone pretty much, and she willingly went to the boycott by herself, and she sacrificed her food. But nobody ever jumped on Khadija in the street and started hitting her. That never happened, right? She was a noble woman. Nobody would dare do that to her. What do you think is going to happen to Sumayya? The complete opposite. And this is why we said Sumayya is, practically speaking, very different in lifestyle to Khadija, even though her iman and heart is just like Khadija. But she has a very different life. She's a very old woman, she's black, and she is, again, a woman and a mawla, a former slave. Yani she is the bottom of society in Mecca. She has absolutely nothing going for her. She has everything to lose, right? Nothing to gain even. So, but she still remains firm on her belief. There was a person in Mecca who was the one that would encourage everyone to torture the Muslims the most. And who was this person? That was that person I said we'd get back to. Amr ibn Hisham, the guy who proposed to Khadija, and she said, "No, I have a bad feeling about him." And the Rasul ﷺ gave him a name. He said, "This person is Abu Jahl. He is the father of ignorance." This person, from how ignorant he is, how evil he is, the Quraysh used to call him Abu Hakam, the father of wisdom, because he's so smart, he's so wise. The Rasul ﷺ said, no, this is Abu Jahl. Forget Abu Hakam, this is Abu Jahl. And Abu Jahl becomes number 1 enemy of the Muslims. I mean, when I study this guy's life, I'm like, this guy has no life. His every waking moment is, how am I going to make the Muslims' lives more miserable? How am I going to make their lives worse and worse and worse? And what he does is basically all of the slaves, all of the mawlas, all of the servants, the poor people, Abu Jahl gathers them up and he starts torturing them. And he would torture them publicly. So he would take Sumayya and her son Ammar and her Yasir and the other Muslims as well, and in the middle of the street they would tie them up and they would start whipping them. Now imagine an old woman, right? And she's an old woman, like she's a teta basically, and you have this big 6-foot guy whipping her. Like, how sick is that? But she would hold firm to her religion, right? And this annoyed Abu Jahl so much that every time he would tell her, "Go back to our religion, we'll give you money, we'll stop this." She's like, no, I ain't doing that. So the torturing would get worse and worse. Some of the things that he would do is that they would take them out into the desert in the midday sun, like dhuhr time. And they would put metal armor on their bodies and leave them out in the sun to cook. And maybe we don't appreciate this, but I guess an equivalent of how we would understand it is if you parked your car at the beach right? Closed the doors, closed the windows, left the person inside, tied up, and it's 120 degrees outside. What's going to be inside the car? It's going to be like 160, right? You'll choke if you don't turn on the AC. And this is what they would do too. They would cover them in metal sheets and armor and just leave them out in the sun and cook them alive. And when that didn't work, he would start beating. And when beating didn't work, he would put their heads in the water and like basically keep like dunking their head in the water. And when that wouldn't work, he kept experimenting until one day he had Sumayya and he would put pieces of like metal rods in a fire, cook it until the metal was white hot. And then he would start putting it on her arms and her legs and start searing her skin. One day the Rasul ﷺ passes by and he sees this happening and he says, يا نار كوني بردا وسلاما على سمية كما كنت بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم. He says, O fire, be cool on Sumayya and the family of Yasir. He also mentions, just like you were cool on Ibrahim. Just like when, the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim, when he was thrown into the fire, Allah commanded the fire to be cold. So the Rasul ﷺ made dua for them. Here's a question, why didn't the Rasul ﷺ save them? Why didn't he go like Batman and just like set them free? Yeah.
That'd be much harder.
Okay, it is much, much harder.
They weren't allowed to fight.
They weren't allowed to fight. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very good. Allah did not give the Muslims permission to go and start fighting. The other thing that is hard for us to stomach sometimes, and we don't really digest this very well, is that the Muslims are very weak. They just didn't have that kind of power. Right? I remember I gave this class one time, and there was a khalto, like an older sister sitting in the audience, and I could see she was getting visibly upset when I was saying this, and she raised her hand and she's like, where was Abu Bakr? Where was Umar? Where were the companions? They couldn't go and protect the Muslims. Like, they were cowards. They just stood there and did nothing. I said, where are you from? She says, I'm from like Freehold or something like that. I was like, no, like, where are you originally from? She said, Palestine. I said, where are the Muslims to defend Palestine? And when we see Masjid al-Aqsa, we see women and children get shot in Israel by the Israelis. Where are the Muslims? So the Muslims are there. We're just very weak. There's nothing we can do. Of course, everybody wants to help and they want to, but we're in a state of weakness. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees, that sometimes people are weak and then they become strong again. And this is what happened in only 23 years, right? The Muslims went from being tortured in the sands, right, to basically taking over the Roman and Persian Empire in 23 years, a very short time. So there's nothing the Rasul ﷺ could do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But, essentially, the Rasul ﷺ, the only thing he could do is dua. So if anytime you see something bad happening to Muslims and you're making dua and you feel guilty, you feel bad, it's like, man, all I can do is just make dua, that's it? Oh, Allah help the Muslims in China, okay. Oh, Allah help the Muslims in India. Okay, Allah help the Muslims in Palestine. Oh, Allah help the Muslims. Is that it? We can only make dua? Yes. And this is a weapon, that's the only weapon that we have. And the Rasul ﷺ himself was in a situation where all he could do is dua. So don't feel bad about that. In fact, it's better that you make dua than you don't make dua. Anyways, what would Abu Jahl want? Why was he torturing them in the first place? Number one, he wanted them to leave Islam. But that wasn't working. No matter what he did, they wouldn't leave Islam. But what would happen is this, and there's actually a funny story about that. It's sad, but it's kind of funny. That he would torture them so much that they wouldn't know what they're saying. So Abu Jahl would be like, come everyone, look, I made them go back to our religion. Is Hubal your God? They say, yes, yes, yes. Is Lat your God? Yes, yes, yes. Is Uzza your God? Yes, yes, yes. So you see, I made them go back to our religion. So one of the guys was like, I don't think so. He was like, watch this. He went up to them, he says, is that ant your God? They're like, yes, yes, yes. See, they're just saying yes to anything you said. They just want you to stop torturing. They're not actually going back to your religion. So Abu Jahl, he was like, all right, let's try something else. So he said, if you insult Muhammad, I'll let you go. Like he would torture them. And he would say, if you insult Muhammad, I'll let you go. And they would keep torturing. And Sumayya would keep her mouth shut. She wouldn't give what Abu Jahl wanted. No matter what he did. And some of the torture methods he did were very sadistic. Like how does this guy come up with this stuff? Again, like a huge guy against an old frail woman. And she wouldn't say anything, but in one occasion, he tortured Ammar, her son, so much that he insulted the Prophet. And he became so upset about this that he went to the Rasul and he said, Ya Rasulullah, they made me say things against you, they made me insult you, like say very bad words against you. What does the Rasul say to him? He said, In aadu ud. He said, if they do it again, say it again. Like insult me all you want, don't worry about it. I want you to insult me if they torture you. Why is he saying this? He doesn't want him to get hurt. He says, listen, your heart is Muslim. What happens with your tongue if they force you or whatever? And I'll keep saying whatever you want. And this is what we say that we see in the books, that all of the Muslims, when they got tortured, eventually they used to say whatever the Quraysh wanted them to say, just out of pain and torture like that. As a human being, they couldn't take it anymore. There was only one person that no matter what, he would never say anything. No, till the very end, he never said a word. Who knows who that person was? The most famous tortured Muslim in history. Bilal. And drove his master crazy. Like he's like, at one point he said, just say Lat. I don't even want to say you to say Lat is your God. Just say Lat. And he wouldn't. He said, Ahadun Ahad, Ahadun Ahad. So it drove him crazy. Sumayya, however, she was one of those people that kept holding firm and kept annoying Abu Jahl. And he really did not like her because he did not like the fact that a woman, an old woman, an old black woman stands up to him. He says, who are you? Do you know who you are? Do you know what I am? Like, who are you to stand up to me? So one day, he tortures them for a very long time. And he keeps going and going and going and going until it's nighttime. And his slaves are like, should we go home? And he says, no, you keep torturing them. We're not going home. And he tortures them so much that, yes, it is dying. Yes, it is an old man, her husband, he's dying. He's not, like, he's literally gonna pass away. And, subhanAllah, this is so stupid, so sad. Abu Jahl, he sees Yasir dying and he goes to Sumayya. He says, I have good news for you, Sumayya. Your husband is about to die, so you can go marry your crush Muhammad. He literally says, like, this is what you really want, right? You want to marry Muhammad? Your husband's about to die. I have good news for you. You're gonna... So she looks at him and she says, Ikhsit ya adu Allah. She said, shut up, you enemy of Allah. Because you are so filthy and so wretched. And she had no chill. She didn't care. She would say what she wanted against him. And he told her, he said, listen, I'm going to kill him and I'm going to kill you too. And you're going to say what I want you to say. You're going to die and the last thing that you say is what I want you to say. Meaning you're going to say that my gods are the real gods, and that's going to be the last thing you say. And she looks at him and she said, أَنْتَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيَّ مِنَ الْبُعْدِ. Which is such a gangster thing she says to him. She said, you are more pathetic to me than a dung beetle. Like I would step on you with my shoe. Like where is she getting this courage? Like I want you to admit, she's like an 80-year-old woman, very frail, very short. She's been starved and beaten for weeks and weeks and weeks. Her husband's about to die, right? And she's looking at this man and she says, you're a cockroach, dude. Like, I would step on you with my shoe. And when Abu Jahl hears this, he loses it. He loses his mind. He's so enraged by this woman. He's so enraged, like he can't control this woman, that no matter what he does to her, she keeps talking back to him. Right? So he grabs an idol and he shoves it in her face. Like, they used to have these little stone statues, right? There's the real God and then there's like the iPad mini version of the God that they would carry around. It's just stupid religion, subhanAllah. And he would shove it in her face. And he say Hubal is your God. Say Hubal is your God. Now Ammar, he's right in front of his mom, by the way, all of this is happening. And he says, Ya Ummi, he says, Mom, just say what he wants. Mom, the Rasul gave us permission, just say what he wants. And she looks, she's like, no, I'm tired of doing what this guy says. And she says, are you going to go back against the religion of Muhammad? Are you going to sell your religion just like that because this guy beats you up? And she looks at Abu Jahl and she spits in his face. He's shoving the statue in her face, she spits at his face. Abu Jahl, when this happens, he's so shocked and so mad that he's not even thinking anymore. He grabs a spear from one of his slaves and kills her. Just straight up murders her. And this was the first time a Muslim was ever killed since the Rasul ﷺ came with Islam. This is the first, everyone was tortured, everybody was beaten and insulted, but this is the first time blood was spilled, the first time someone died for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are a lot of little kids here, but he stabs her and kills her in a very brutal way, like in a very nasty way. He kills her instantly. And right after this, after he kills her, her husband, he doesn't live very long, he passes away as well. Sumayya is widely regarded, and it's very well known amongst all Muslims, and we should know this. Sumayya is the first Shahida of Islam. The first martyr of Islam. What is a martyr? In case somebody doesn't know. Somebody who died for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And truly, what a brave woman, what a hero. Anybody that you know who's named Sumayya, after this class, go and tell them who they're named after, because they should know where the name came from. It's not just any random name. Sumayya is a hero. Now, Abu Jahl has just killed Ammar's parents. And he goes to Ammar now and he says, that's it, Abu Jahl lost his mind. He says, khalas, I'm done. Forget this. I'm killing anyone who's in front of me. So he goes to Ammar and he says, last chance. So Ammar basically says all the words of shirk that Abu Jahl wants. And the Muslims find him and he's crying, he's crying, he's crying. Why is he crying? Not because of his parents. This is what everyone thought. He's so upset about what he said. He feels like a coward that his parents refused to say it, they died, and he said it. So he starts turning away from the Prophet. Every time he sees the Prophet, he doesn't look at him. So the Rasul ﷺ calls him, he says, Yabna Sumayya, he says, son of Sumayya, come here. Which is very interesting, because if you know anything about Arabs, or Arab culture, who are you the son of?
Dad.
Your dad. Who are you the father of? Your son, right? The women is not involved usually, right? Ibn this, ibn that, the father of this, the father. It's always the father. The Rasul ﷺ, because of who Sumayya was, he called her son of Sumayya. Like, you are the son of Sumayya. Like, to honor Sumayya. Not saying that Yasir was something bad. Yasir, radiallahu anhu, he was a shaheed as well. But because Sumayya, she was at the top of it, she says, no, enough of this. I'm tired of this. Let's go to Jannah. Right? So he calls Ammar and he says, why are you turning away from me? And he says, Ya Rasulullah, I disbelieved in Islam. I'm going to Jahannam. Like, I said all the words of the disbelief. And the Rasul said, how do you find your heart? Like, what's your heart? And Ammar says, I believe in Allah and His Messenger. Like, my heart is still a Muslim. And Allah reveals the ayat of the Quran, إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Allah reveals the ayat of the Quran, whoever is forced to disbelieve, then they are not considered a disbeliever. Because they were forced, again, from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And after this incident, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the verses of Surah Al-Ankabut, which is Alif Lam Mim, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do the people think that they're just going to say, I'm a Muslim, and they're not going to be tested? They're going to be put through huge tests and terrible tests. فَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. So that Allah knows who is true and genuine to His religion and who was lying or who was insincere. What happens after this? The Rasul ﷺ, for the rest of his life, will always call Ammar ibn Sumayya. And this is again as an honor to Sumayya, he calls Ammar the son of Sumayya. And by the way, the very sad reality is Abu Jahl gets away with this. He's not going to face any crime and he's not going to get arrested or go to court for murder or something like that. He's like, he killed a black slave, who cares? Just buy a new one, right? So he's going to walk around Mecca and make fun of what he did, and Ammar has to listen to this and stuff. And we have sometimes, I'll mention another woman as well that in Mecca at the time, she was another, I don't know if she was a slave, but she was definitely like a servant or from a low class. Her name was Zinira. And Abu Jahl used to torture her as well. And he used to beat her in the back of the head, right? And we have in medical, we have the occipital lobe, which is where the optical nerve is, where your eyes, the nerve is in the back of the head. Abu Jahl used to beat this woman, Zinira, in the back of the head until she became blind. Right? So this guy was like a very terrible, terrible person. But when she became blind, Abu Jahl started laughing and telling the other people, Allat and Uzza made her blind. Right? Our gods made her blind, they cursed her. And Zinira looks at him, she's blind now, and she's still standing up. She says, no, your gods cannot do anything. Allah took away my sight. If He wants, He'll bring it back. And the next day, Allah gives her sight back. And even after everything He did and stuff like that, Allah, she would still stay firm. So this man, truly one of the worst human beings at the time. At the Battle of Badr, right, when the Battle of Badr comes, Abu Jahl is the leader of the disbelievers. And, for those that attended my seerah lectures before, you know what happens to Abu Jahl. Two kids see him, and when they see him, they ask one of the companions. So there were two kids from the Ansar. They never lived in Mecca. They all lived in Medina, right? So these two kids, they went up to Abdurrahman ibn Auf and they say, hey, who's Abu Jahl? And Abdurrahman's like, why do you want to know who Abu Jahl is? So we heard that he used to insult the Prophet, so we want to kill him. Right? 15, 14 years old, right? So Abdurrahman's like, if I see him, I'll point to him. Now Abu Jahl is like the main warrior. He's like the main bad guy, right? And these two kids, he insulted the Prophet, we want to kill him. So during the battle, Abdurrahman sees Abu Jahl on the other side. He points to him and says, that guy over there, that's Abu Jahl. These two kids, they look at each other, they start racing who's going to kill him first. Kids back then wanted to defend Islam. Nowadays, you insult somebody's easy slides and he wants to throw hands. Someone makes fun of Islam, that's cool, bro. But you make fun of my TikTok or something like that, I'm gonna meet you outside after school. Right? We have the wrong reasons that we want to fight. So these two kids, they see Abu Jahl and they run to him, and Abu Jahl is so surprised that two kids want to fight him. One of them cuts his stomach, the other one slices off his leg. And after the battle, Abu Jahl is on the battlefield, he's just bleeding out. And as a dishonor, Allah's like, yo, you got killed by a 14-year-old? Right? And he's just sitting there, he's bleeding to death. And just to see how terrible this person is, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, one of the other companions, he finds Abu Jahl and he's bleeding, he's dying. And he sees Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and Abu Jahl says, who won the battle? And Abdullah says, Allah and His Messenger won. Right? So Abu Jahl, he says, Abdullah says, do you see how Allah has humiliated you? And Abu Jahl is like, me humiliated? No. I'm a man killed by my own people. You guys are the ones who are humiliated. And then he asks, who are those people fighting with you? These white people, in all white, these big people. And Abdullah is like, the messenger, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent His angels. So Abu Jahl is like, thank the gods, I got to fight the angels before I die. Right? And when you compare Fir'aun, at least when Fir'aun was going to die, what did he try saying? He tried to say the Shahada. Abu Jahl is about to die, he's like, yeah, I got to fight the angels. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud cuts off Abu Jahl's head and brings it to the Rasul ﷺ, and the Rasul ﷺ says, هَذَا فِرْعَوْنُ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ. He says, this is the Fir'aun of our ummah. By the way, this whole story of Sumayya, who does it remind you of? Asya. And this is because, I mentioned this in my Sunday school classes. The people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in the Quran are not just people, they're archetypes. You're going to find throughout history people that are just like Fir'aun. There will always be a person like Fir'aun, and there will always be a person like Asya. And history repeats itself over and over. And Fir'aun, Abu Jahl is the Fir'aun of our ummah. We didn't have a Fir'aun, but Abu Jahl is our Fir'aun. And who is our Asya in our ummah? Sumayya. Just like Asya, this exact same thing, even the same way that they tortured, just like Fir'aun tortured his wife, the same way he tortured Sumayya. We get into the details of what he did. But in the end, after Abu Jahl is killed, the Rasul ﷺ goes to Ammar and he says, Allah has killed the murderer of your mother. He doesn't say these two kids killed him. What does he say? He says, Allah has killed the murderer of your mother. He says, I want you to make this clear. Allah gave you victory. Allah avenged you. as an honor again to Ammar ibn Yasir. In conclusion, yeah, this very sad story that maybe I should have put a warning at the beginning. It's too late now. You're asking me about if it's PG, about pregnancy. I just went full out. SubhanAllah. But this very sad story, again, shows us the courage that the women of Jannah have. The women of Jannah are not just like Nancy women, they're out buying shoes and, looking for purses and talking about boys and having, like painting their nails. Right? These are women that sacrifice everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, in order to follow their example, we don't need to be tortured. We don't need to go out into the sun and be whipped and, beaten and stabbed with a spear in order to be like them. However, when the time comes that our fitna comes, our test comes, we should not be cowards. And I say this very bluntly, some Muslims, their test is pathetic. I'm not taking away from anyone's life, but sometimes their test is very pathetic, very easy, and they buckle and they become cowards. Right? Here's a funny story. I had a Muslim kid, right? He got his first job. He's only 15 years old, 16 years old. And he came to me and he said, I work long hours in my new job and the time for prayer comes. And I don't want to pray in front of my boss. Is it okay if I just wait till I get home and pray all the prayers at home? I said, listen, Habibi, why are you afraid of your boss? Just ask permission. I need a 2-minute, people take smoking breaks every hour and they're not ashamed. Right? Why should you be ashamed to pray? He says, I don't know. I said, listen, here in America, it's your right that you can go and take a prayer break and they can't stop you from doing that. And I said, listen, and if you need a letter from the masjid or from me to explain it or from your parents, I'll do that for you. He says, I just don't want to pray in front of my boss. It's awkward, it's weird. I said, no, you should be brave. You should, not be scared and stuff like that. I was trying to encourage him. I said, listen, if you want, I can explain what the prayer is to him if that's what you're afraid of. He says, oh, no, he already knows what the prayer is. I said, he does? He said, yeah, it's Ammu Muhammad from the masjid. He's my boss. I said, Habibi, I'm going to get the shoe right now and smack you in the head. Get out of here right now. His boss is a Muslim and he's afraid to pray. I was we need a spinal cord, guys, sometimes. It's we want to throw away our religion, because we're so afraid of what other people are going to think. Wallahi al-azim, I'm not making this story up. When I heard this, I wanted to smack him. I was like, are you crazy? He's your boss. He comes and prays at Fajr at the masjid. I see him myself. It made no sense. But my point is, we're not going to be, Allahu A'lam, maybe may Allah, we should always ask for afiyah. Somebody might get hurt or tortured or threatened for being a Muslim or for practicing being a Muslim. We should not be cowards. But again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very merciful. You saw what happened even when Ammar was forced to say words of shirk. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throw him in Jahannam? No. He said, listen, if you're being forced, you can say it. And the Rasul himself said, if they force you to insult me, say it. Go ahead, I don't care, just say it. Right? But sometimes we take this and we act as if everything is being tortured. Oh, I don't fast because, I have a soccer game. Okay. There's a lot of soccer players in the world that fast. It's not that hard. Oh, I don't want to celebrate Eid because, people will ask, why didn't you go to school? And, it's just weird, as if we're ashamed of our religion, as if we're scared that someone will find out. Who cares, bro? Bro, the most Googled person in the world in 2022 is who? Huh? Mansa Musa. No, the most Googled person in the world in 2022. Who was it? No, Muhammad Salah. Andrew Tate. He's a Muslim. He's very vocal about his Islam. Right? The most popular, most famous person in the world is Muslim. Why should we? Anyways, I'm not going to get too deep into this. But the point is, what we can learn from Sayyidah Sumayya, radiallahu anha, is that she didn't buckle under the pressure. And her pressure was way more than what we go through. So you and me, inshallah, we'll never have to face something to that level. Right? We need to have kind of this firmness that, listen, I don't do this, end of story. You don't like it, get out. Right? And it doesn't mean everything is going to be a fight. Inshallah, you'll meet very nice people who are very nice and accommodating. But if the time comes when there are people that are trying to push you away from Islam or make fun of you because of Islam or for whatever reason trying to, demean your religion, we shouldn't roll over like a puppy and say, okay, I'm sorry. That's not a Muslim. A Muslim is firm, and this is a Muslim woman who was the lowest of society, and she was old as well. So as us young people, especially young Muslim women nowadays, mashallah, one thing I have to say about the young women of our generation is that they're not meek, they're not quiet, they stand up and they speak out. And I mean, just recently there was, I think from Harvard Law, or a law student was a Muslim hijabi girl, and she gave a speech, and it's been on the news. She gave a speech, and in her speech she spoke out against, let's end the thing right here.